After evening prayers on May the 6th, 2009, a mosque garden in Granai is hit by a 2,000-pound US bomb. The Red Cross records 93 children killed by Obama's B-1, and a grave filled with flesh from 55 people. More and more enemies are created, and more innocents die, as Ahab's harpoons metastasize into US missiles, while the ghost of his crew member Starbuck pleads, "Never, never wilt thou capture him, old man. In Jesus' name, no more of this." This is worse than devil's madness. 2 days chased, twice stove to splinters, thy very leg once more snatched from under thee, all good angels mobbing thee with warnings. What more wouldst thou have? Shall we keep chasing this murderous fish till he swamps the last man? Shall we be dragged by him to the bottom of the sea? Shall we be towed by him to the infernal world? Oh, impiety and blasphemy to hunt him more. But Ahab's not listening. For Ahab, by his own admission, is madness maddened. And such madness continues in the eyes of uranium expert Dr. Bertel, commenting on the use of uranium dust to harden shells. They've gotten to the point where they're killing their own people. Any intelligent animal would stop at a point like that. After Fallujah, whose name in Arabic means arable land, was destroyed, its radioactive rubble was bulldozed into the Euphrates. A baby was born with 3 heads after its mother drank DU water. For the US to have cheap gas, its own soldiers are contaminated. And paradoxically, a war prosecuted by self-proclaimed Christians thirsty for Iraq's underground lakes of black gold has led to the wide-scale slaughter of Iraq's Christian communities. 40 dead in the Cathedral of Baghdad in 2010. Nonetheless, killing children with flying robots to keep the US in oil is finessed by a lawyer president into a good war. There are terrorists holed up in those mountains, Obama's insisted, who murdered 3,000 Americans. But the perpetrators of 9/11 are dead. The assailants were vaporized, and their victims more than adequately avenged, since each spectral floor where the World Trade Center once stood has been crammed with the fruits of US revenge. Each stairwell has been patriotically stuffed with thousands of Muslims bombed as exaction for the tower's collapse. But though Einstein declared killing under the cloak of war was nothing but an act of murder and a good war's lie, any oil region is deviously dubbed a national security interest if the US has the remotest design on them. The Pashtun would object to a 2,000-mile pipeline across their land, carrying oil, fueling bombers, mowing them down. But a war on them was dubbed by presidents as a good war, though fought by airmen such as Lieutenant Denton. When you're on top of the enemy, you look, you shoot, and you die. I told my wife, if I could come home every night, the job would be perfect. You just see a big dust cloud, and wow, that's where a person used to be. I enjoy it because the odds are on our side. You die, he cackles. You don't even have to look at their faces before you kill them. You die, you die, you die, he repeats ecstatically. You die, which prompts a query as to the US's progress since Martin Luther King had once wondered, what Vietnamese think as we test our latest weapons? Dr. King had urged man to shift from a thing to a person-oriented society. For when property, machines, and profits are more important than people, that giant triplet of racism, materialism, and militarism won't be conquered, singling out the US as the greatest purveyor of violence in the world today. At first, Happy to trade on King's kudos, Obama would betray King's nonviolence by saying he himself wasn't against war, only dumb wars. But then to start new wars was equally dumb. To Omali Yeshitela, the African socialist, he's a white man in blackface and just as elitist as before. When whites start telling you how great some black politician is, Malcolm X noted acidly, it's someone whom they control. U.S. progressives may have yearned for their candidate to be anti-war, but an oil-hungry U.S. war machine would get there before them. When being interviewed by the Chicago Tribune in 2004, Obama freely announced he'd attack Pakistan and Iran, and that he'd continue the policies of Bush Sr. and Reagan, thus clearly grooming himself for the U.S. imperium. Obama made himself acceptable to the right by saying of Reagan, he changed the trajectory of America after the excesses of the 60s, choosing to forget such excesses had included the U.S. peace movement. An excessive Reagan bombed Libya, invaded Lebanon and Grenada, and left nuns in El Salvador for dead. He sponsored Star Wars, coddled dictators, and he busted unions. Yet, to Obama, he brought a sense of optimism. From early on, Obama was vetted to see he'd respect the ruling class and not disturb its vested interests nor its guiding principles, whereby inequality, according to a Goldman Sachs chairman, is a way of achieving prosperity for all. He'd passed the test. When some supporters began asking if they'd crowned a wolf in sheep's clothing, his gullible fans still fondly insisted he was their chosen one, though others had reckoned he was chosen to break down African resistance. In the words of Yeshitela, he was neocolonialism on steroids. For those too young to realize, as Crosscheck TV has put it, Obama is a biracial version of Richard Nixon, straight from CIA central casting, a front man to fit our times. A man of war who sold himself as a man of peace. We can send 30,000 more troops, but I don't know any experts on the region who think that'll make a substantial difference, he'd said in 2008. 2 years later, he'd say the opposite. If we placed 30,000 more troops in there, we'd see a reduction in the violence. But as the U.S. Congress passed another $94 billion for the war, an Afghan activist, Miriam Nawabi, would observe, looking over the walls of the bases, we see that troops have everything. They're not there to help us, so the violence increases. In September 2009, an Afghan farmer would tell The Guardian, after a series of Obama's attacks, I couldn't find my son, so I took a piece of flesh with me home. He looked down at his hands, and I called it my son. After thousands fled their homes following Obama's drone bombings, the elusive al-Qaeda leader broadcast an audio tape, as U.S. policy has led to killing, fighting, bombing, and destruction. The U.S. would reap what the White House leaders have sown. Obama and his administration have sown new seeds, bin Laden said, to increase hatred and revenge on America. And then he added, the number of these seeds is equal to the number of displaced people from Swat Valley.